Welcome on in, everybody. Good to see everybody in chat. What's up, Ofrosia? I see Robert. I think I saw Stony in there. Our mod, Wade Cuff. Good to see you, Wade. Patrick, Jennifer, welcome on in, everybody. So my name is Sam Peterson. I'm going to be your host for today's Photoshop challenge. Today we're going to be creating an illustrated composite effect where it looks like a drawing is coming to life off the page. And I can jump on into Photoshop and show you what that's going to look like. So this is what we're working with. This is the starter file. You should be able to access this from the description below, and that should have everything you need. But the effect that we're going for today is going to be a little something like this. Let me blow this up for you a little bit. So this is kind of what we're creating. Feel free to get creative with it, kind of take it the direction you want. You could just make it completely like a drawing on the page. You could kind of do this half and half composite, but we're going to go over all these techniques today that will give us this effect. So if you have the starter file, there's only one asset, well, two assets, including this background, but this is the one in the asset folder here. So we're gonna go ahead and grab this. I've just been duplicating these out of my asset folder with Controller Command J, making a copy, dragging that out of the asset folder, and we can hide the asset folder. Let me make sure I drag that out fully. There we go. So this is our image. I may scale this down a bit so we can see the whole thing. What I want to do here is I want to remove the background. So with that, we could go into the quick selection tool, and we can do select subject. That's one, but I've been liking the object selection tool lately. Find that it gives me that, and we'll just select around all of this. Make sure we're on the layer, on the correct layer with her on it. And that did a pretty good job. I'm going to go ahead and go into my quick selection tool to clean up this, because I have noticed that this dress isn't fully selected. So I'm holding on Shift to add to the selection, dragging over here, making sure I get all those parts it missed. Deselected this space in between the hands and the dress, so I'm going to hold on Alt or Option and click that space, and that looks pretty good. We have a little spot down at the leg here. We could subtract from that by holding Alt or Option. But I think it's going to be fine for our purposes. The hair is probably something that needs to be cleaned up a bit here. So we can go into Select and Mask and use the Refine Edge brush tool over here on the left-hand side. You'll see it's the second one. And I'll just select around the edges of the hair. Sometimes you get hard edges. Again, it probably doesn't matter for this specific effect, but it's a good tool to have. A good one to know. Maybe in between the hair a little bit there. And we can click OK. Now what we could do is go down and mask it. This little button here at the bottom of the layers panel. Click mask. But you'll notice there's a lot of this blue haloing that I don't really care for around the hair. So what we could do is we could go do Control Z. We could go back into select mask. And we could try decontaminate colors. I got it on the third try. Click OK. And now that's looking a lot better to me. We don't have that odd blue halo around all of the hair. Looks like we actually lost a bit of her bow here. You know, we could try to paint that in. Might use a soft brush. So you can always edit these after the fact. These masks after the fact. So very flexible. So that's looking good. This is perfect for our purpose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and flip this. Let's do Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal, because we're going to want her seated on the sketchbook in this orientation. So from here, everything's looking solid. What we can do is we can back this up. Well, first off, let's make this a smart object. We'll right-click this layer and do Convert to Smart Object, because we're going to start scaling it down, and this way we won't lose any resolution. We'll have a little bit of flexibility without worrying if we're kind of working destructively for this. So what I want to do is scale this down a bit, and actually I might just keep this as an original. Just call this OG for original. We'll do Controller Command J for a backup, and we'll just do figure, and I'll scale this down to be seated on the page where I want. So I'm going to kind of come up with an orientation that looks good. I want her head popping off the page for that added like 3D effect to kind of sell that. Her foot, we can just mask it out, but I think something like that looks pretty good. Makes it a little smaller. I'm going to press enter. So from here, we're going to make a few different versions of this. I'm going to make 3 copies of this. I'm going to do Controller Command J 3 times. And we're going to go ahead and try some different effects out on this. Are you guys getting connection issues? I am seeing red. I thought I solved this. This shouldn't be happening. I'm going to have to look into it a little bit more. I apologize. But hopefully this is still going to come out. I'll just go ahead and continue. And hopefully you guys can see the major steps that we're about to do. So from here, I'm going to try some different effects, some different filter effects. So we're going to kind of get different pencil type effects, and there's 3 that I want to check out. So if we go into filter, we go into filter gallery, we can try photocopy for the first one. So photocopy is going to kind of be like our line effect, kind of like a outline of it. You can try different amounts for the detail and the darkness. You can see I want to keep it pretty low because that kind of gives us more of a line art effect. The other, when it gets too thick, it doesn't really have the same look to it. And then you can try different amounts for the darkness. It really just depends how prominent you want these lines. You can kind of see on the leg it's a little less noticeable too. So we can try something around maybe 30. I think that kind of gives me the effect I want. 25, 30, something like that. We'll do 27. Click OK. So that is our photocopy effect. Photocopy. I'm going to go over to this next one and do, we're going to do another effect. So let's go into filter, filter gallery. And for this one, we're going to try charcoal. So you can see this is a much different effect. It gives us some really nice shading that kind of looks like pencil as well. So for this one, you can experiment with how thick you want this. I might do like 4 for that, for the detail. You can see those inner lines, the smaller details. Makes it more prominent. I want some of that, but not too much. Actually, I might like that maxed out a little bit. We could do like 4. And then for the light and dark balance, this really just affects kind of how prominent that interior is. I don't want it too much. It starts to look a little fake. So I might do it around 50. Click OK. And that looks pretty good to me. This is the charcoal effect here. For what purposes are we using the filter gallery? So the filter gallery is giving us these different kind of drawn effects. Each one looks a little bit different, but we're going to combine these to hopefully have like an illustrated look. And I'll show you the last one here. We'll go back into filter gallery and we're going to do a graphic pen for this one. Now there's only a couple settings here. Stroke length. I find that the shorter strokes look a little bit more like pointillism. If that's the effect you want to go for, definitely check it out. But I want that kind of like hatch mark effect that you often see with pen drawings or pencil drawings. The light and dark balance, again, you can try playing with. It's really just how prominent those lines are. I don't, if you do it too little, you don't really get much of anything. I probably want it around 30. I kind of like where we had it there. You can also do different stroke directions, but I find that the right diagonal looks really good for our effect. So I'm going to click OK. And from here, that's looking pretty good. So what we're going to do is blend this in with the page a little bit more, because currently we have this white background on top of this cream colored paper. It doesn't really look right. Doesn't seem to make too much sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all these layers into multiply layers. I can select them all with Shift click, set these to multiply. And you can kind of flip through them and see how they look individually. So this is the photocopy effect. It's kind of thin lines. Charcoal by itself looks like that. It's more of a softer shading. And then the graphic pen, I'll name that now, graphic pen, there we go. has that sort of hatch mark. Now it's a little bit aggressive for me when I turn them all on. I want to turn the graphic pen down. It's a bit too much. Maybe I'll turn it down to like 40%. I like how it just adds a little bit of shading there. It's not too prominent, too aggressive. And I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and group these. Hold on Shift, select all of them, press Control or Command G for group. And I'm going to name this pencil effect. And I'm going to go ahead and add our figure to the top. I'm going to make a duplicate, drag that into our group. And that way we have a backup of these as well. So what I want to do is I want to actually mask out the group that's overlapping the sketchbook. Currently we have our foot sticking out, the TV. We do want the head sticking out, but let's go ahead and mask out the drawing on the group. So I'm going to create a layer mask on the group itself. Make sure that mask is selected. And I'm going to select black to mask it out. So black conceals, white reveals, so you can always bring it back with white. And I'm just going to kind of paint over the area of the foot that's overlapping the page, the TV that's overlapping. You could even kind of, do light little strokes like this. If you're using a mouse, just use a lower flow to get those build-up strokes, but just to look like it kind of fades out a little bit. TV kind of gives it more of a lighter look too. Could even do that on the foot around the edge. So that looks pretty good. So that effect I think is pretty nice in and of itself, but what we're going to do is we're going to kind of combine that photo with the rest of it. So what I want to do is I want to go into our group, open it up, and check out our photo here. I'm going to go ahead and harmonize this to try to blend it in with the rest of the image. Currently the lighting and the colors don't really fit. So one thing we can do is we can go into Filter, Neural Filters here at the top. And then we can go into Harmonization. So if you check this on, it will have us select a reference image. So we have her selected, and the reference image we want to do is the background that she's fitting into, which is just called background. And now you can see it's loading down here. It's calculating. So it changed it up a little bit more to the colors. I don't think it quite hit the mark. I think it went a bit too dark, a little bit too saturated. I may want to try to bring in a little bit more warmth. If you look at this scene, it's kind of a warm, it almost looks like a morning light. So I want to maybe bump the yellows a little bit. We'll try that, see how that looks. We'll go ahead and bump the brightness up a bit. I took that to around 9. We'll try bumping up the saturation. I think it took down the saturation a little too much. I think that's too much at 11, so let's try maybe like 7 or 8. That's pretty good. The strength of the overall effect, I might want to crank down a little bit. And something like that I think is looking a little bit more towards what I'm going for. So I'm going to click OK. And you can see it output it to a new layer. So this is the original. This is the harmonized new layer. So what I'm going to do here is, well, I could lower the opacity. If this is too much, you can always lower the opacity of that new output layer, kind of like till you're comfortable with it. I think taking it down a bit does help. I still think the effect's a bit too powerful, but I didn't want to adjust it too much in the harmonize because I could always lower the opacity. So I think maybe around like 65, 70, that looks okay to me. I can always adjust it later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of those photo images, the original and then the harmonized one, and I'm going to group them. So we'll have another group within our group, and I'll just call this photo. So that way we can toggle that on and off. And what we can do from here is we can mask this out. So we're going for that effect where she's partially pencil and then she's kind of coming to life on the top of it. And we can do that by masking the group here. So if we add a mask, little square icon at the bottom here, it will create a mask on our group there. Also just want to say hey to everyone. I see RB in the chat. Anki, I don't know if anyone else popped in since I last peeked in. Peter, good to see you. Enlightened Swami, checking if we have any questions here. definitely let me know. We can ask those. Again, looks like I'm having a little bit of a connection issue. Hopefully that works itself out. My apologies. Sam, what if you selected the background and used the figure as a reference? Oh, interesting. So you're saying if we try to adapt the environment to the photo, you could definitely try that. I think it's always good to experiment and try those things out. Um, Usually I try to adapt the subject to the environment because the environment typically has so much lighting information, like it is the lighting essentially, like whatever lamps or sun lighting is in that. So I find it easier to usually adjust the subjects, but I'd definitely say try it, see if it gives you a look that you like. Also, it's good just as a rule of thumb to try to match the lighting and the perspective of the images you're using off the bat because if you have a subject that's just inherently lit from a different angle, it's not going to look quite right. I don't think this subject is quite lit the same as our environment, but I think it's close enough. We don't see a really hard light that makes it look too wrong, but typically you want to try to match those the best you can when you're choosing your photos. So let's go ahead and go into this and mask out our photo so it looks like it's kind of a half drawn and half photo effect. So what I'm going to do is I created that mask on our group, the group that has our photo in it. I'm going to select my brush tool and I'm going to select black. Again, black conceals, so we can kind of paint this out a little bit like this. And I'm going to kind of keep it like the feet and the hands are sort of faded into a drawing, the bottom of the TV as well. And you can use a textured brush or you can use a soft round. Soft round is always nice for those smooth transitions, but the textured one kind of gives you almost like a painted look. Like maybe she's half painted, which is kind of cool for that artistic vibe that we're going for. So something like that I think looks kind of neat. And again, if you want that subtle build-up, you can always just lower the flow. I'm using a pen, so it makes it a bit easier for me. So now we got that effect. Let's see where we are. Yeah, so I think that looks pretty good. What I might want to do from here is try adding in some shadow. So she doesn't have any shadow beneath her, but something that I could try. Let's see, we got the photo. I'll make it on top of the graphic pen. I'll just do Control or Command Shift N for a new layer, and then we're gonna name this. We can just name this shadow. I'll set it to multiply. Yeah, it's kind of the aha video effect for sure. I definitely see that. Now I'm gonna have that song stuck in my head for the rest of the day. So I'm gonna select like a really, really desaturated blue purple. We'll just try this. And just kind of do this the shaded area. If you're adding shadows to things like this, take note of environmental shadows. You can see the shadow from the saucer here in the cup, how it's pretty much going like down diagonal to the right. You can kind of see it on the sketchbook as well, but you can often take note of those things and like the how deep are the shadows of the environment. And of course that depends on the surface. The white of the saucer is a much lighter shadow than the table, so keep those things in mind, but they can often be useful little hints. But I'll try this just as a sort of graphic shadow. What we're going to do is we're going to go into Filter, Filter Gallery, and once again we're going to go into Graphic Pen. And it will kind of give us this hatched shadow look. So you can mask this off as much as you want. You could lower the opacity. It's just kind of this effect that I think gives it a little bit more of a sketched look. We have these perfect lines in drawing here, but I think if you give these like more sketchy lines, it looks a little bit more realistic, but I just don't like how opaque it is. So I'm going to lower the opacity. So there's like a little bit of hatching. We could also take this off if it's too much on top of it. Could create another mask. Again, masks just give us a lot of flexibility. And we can kind of paint it off. I'm using a soft round brush. Off the hands, off the legs. Unless you want it, you can keep it as much or as little as you want. I just don't want it to darken those areas around too much. So I kind of like that. It's a little bit of a shadow effect, pretty subtle. Crank that up a little bit more. But I think it gives it a little bit more of an illustrated effect. No Sam stream without a multiply layer. I think multiply layers are my favorite blending mode by far. I'll say second place goes to color dodge. After that, I don't know. I think it's all about multiply and color dodge for me. How about you guys? You guys have a favorite blending mode that you use in like every piece? Because it's not even enough to say that I use multiply in every piece. I use it like a million times in every piece. Let's see here. What can we do next? So I think from here, we can create a little bit of a vignette and do some cropping. I think our effect is pretty much good. You can mess around with it as much as you want. You can try color lookups, photo filters, play around with adjustment layers if you want to tweak the brightness, the saturation, anything like that. Adjustment layers are great for. But what we can maybe try to do here is create a vignette. So on top of all of these folders, at the very top layer, I'm going to do Control or Command Shift N, and we'll do vignette. This will be a multiply layer, my go-to. Actually, no, you know what we could do? We could mix it up. We could mix it up and we could do an adjustment layer. So let's go to layer, new adjustment layer, and we'll do levels. Because this works pretty well for this effect. You can create a vignette in a million ways. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to crank down this bottom bar here. This is essentially saying that the brightest point will be this value that I'm selecting. So it's really taking down the brightness of this whole thing. And I'm going to drag this levels adjustment up and make sure it's on the top so we don't get that effect. There we go. So from here, what I could do is I could select my marquee tool. You can click and hold to see the drop-down menu. Select the elliptical marquee tool and then drag that out here. So from here, what we could do is we could just fill that in with black with the paint bucket tool. And we could try blurring this. Go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. We could probably just like max that out on almost, maybe not max it out, but like, let's try like 280. 240. Looks okay to me. Let's do that. Got a little vignette there to focus the attention on the subject a little bit more. I can always lower the opacity if it's a bit too heavy-handed. I always like to go a bit heavier so I can just lower the opacity to dial it in exactly where I want. So maybe we'll do like 68%. And from here, I also want to crop it because we have so much space around the edges. A lot of times, if you're creating a focal point, I've seen this in different designs, but sometimes it'll be really small and it really feels like you could blow it up and make it a lot more prominent, a lot more eye-catching. And I think that's a good thing with effects like this and images like this because we have a lot of space around the edge. And she looks a little bit small and I don't think it helps that much. So I'm going to press C for the crop tool. And if you hold on Shift, you can maintain the aspect ratio that you have. If you squeeze it to the side, it'll flip it horizontal. But I'm going to try to just crop off the top a little bit, crop off that bottom. Trying to keep tangents in mind to make sure, like, if I have the edge of the frame on the bottom right at the corner of the sketchbook, it creates a bit of a weird tangent. So I'm going to try to avoid things like that. But something like that might be good. So there we go, a little more tightly cropped. And from here, you can always try, if you want to do any adjustment layers or things like you could do photo filters, which are fun to play with. You could do adjustment layers of color lookups. Try that. Feel free to just mess around with things, see if you can get any cool effects. And again, you can always, this is kind of neat actually. Kind of like a vintage look to it. Candlelight is what that was. I like to go through these sometimes just for ideas. This is drop blues. See if there's anything that appeals to you. I'm just scrolling through it with my arrow keys, by the way. Once you select it once, you can just press left and right on the arrow key just to try it quickly. Candlelight, we could try that. Just do 20 opacity on that. So that is it. Guys, sorry again about this connection. I know it's fluctuating. I thought I had it dialed in. Favorite blending modes. Dissolve, yeah. Val's is dissolve, or at least one of them. Val gets a lot of use. Color dodge is the key to success. Overlay, I use overlay a good amount. I think there's some nice flexibility in that. Multiply, screen, overlay, soft light, and color dodge are my favorites. Yeah, that's good. Frank's definitely using them. I use Screen a good amount. I use Overlay, Softlight. Get it from the community as well as the mentors. I am mentoring this, so I will be giving feedback and checking out your designs. We have some awesome alien designs here. These are a lot of fun. And yeah, definitely check them out. You can post any of the challenges that we've been doing. We're going to be doing them this week and next. So if you go to the feedback section, it's the challenge tab, and that's where you're going to be posting the current challenges. There's also like an ask a question section and a lot of others that you can explore here. So thanks so much for hanging out, joining me today. I do appreciate it. Check out the challenge page for all the challenges, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.